There's a new way to stay connected and know what's happening with Market to Market when you subscribe to Market Insider. One email and a lot of information awaits you. Go to markettomarket.org and subscribe to Market Insider. Idaho, Ohio, from our base here in Iowa. I'm making it difficult on me this year, but that's what's going to be the fun of our farmer series here on the MTOM podcast. I'm Paul Yeager. Thanks for joining us. This year, we're going to talk with a producer in Idaho and a producer in Ohio, and we're going to find out how things are going. So we've got the Western Plains and in Idaho, the eastern, southeastern part of the state. We're also going to Ohio, to the northeast section of the state, the Eastern Corn Belt. You've all heard about the Eastern Corn Belt, how rainy it is, how wet it is, and how delayed things have been the last couple of years. We're going to find out firsthand from a farmer on the ground. We're going to talk with Ben Klick. He is a fifth-generation farmer. A lot of corn, a lot of beans, and some wheat and livestock. So we'll find out about his operation in this installment of the podcast, and we'll have conversations with him throughout the year to find out how things are going. So let's get to it and our conversation and our Meet the Farmer for 2025. It's all about racing, or at least that's your connection to Iowa. Had you been to Iowa before you went and came and visited Iowa for that race?
Yeah, so a few times in my past, I actually have a really good friend that farms in Northwest Iowa, up near Kinneret, that area there. So been kind of through that area a little bit. But also had done we bought a couple semis years ago from TMC there in Des Moines. So we went and Dad and I drove out and bought two of their semis from their truck dealership and drove them home. So that was my first intro to going out through Iowa. Of course, we stopped at the truck stop and all that fun stuff too.
Oh, you got to go to Walcott. If you haven't been to Walcott before, highly recommend it. It's always crazy. I used to live over in that area, and you always get these press releases of, well, we're bigger again. Oh, we're bigger again. We beat, and it's just, it's crazy how much stuff there is there.
And it's also crazy just how small of a world it is. When we were in Des Moines, I was just out of college a couple of years, and one of my friends from college, that we were acquaintances, and we were really close, but we were close enough that we hung out and stuff. But he saw where I was at and when I was in Iowa there, and he's like, hey, he said, me and his now wife at the time when they were dating, she went to Iowa State after she left Ohio State to finish out. And so we met them in downtown Des Moines for dinner that night. It was just, what a small world. You can't really go anywhere without, running into somebody, or talking about something, you have mutual acquaintances or whatever it is. So especially in ag.
Well, if you wear that hat of yours, people will know, in the know, they'll ask you, oh, so you farm? And that's kind of how that all goes, right?
That's the funniest thing. My wife absolutely despises when I wear anything farm-related out in public, especially if we go somewhere new. We went to Key West 3 years ago with a couple friend of ours, and we weren't on the island 2 minutes, and we were walking down the main drag, and I had a DeKalb hat on, and from the other side of the road, hey, DeKalb Asgrow, there's a farmer over there. I mean, we weren't there for 5 minutes. It's so funny. Stick out like a sore thumb anywhere we go.
She's shaking her head going, well, I guess I knew what I was getting into. And
yeah, that's
no
right.
stopping
I can't take you anywhere. You'll be talking to some random person. You'll meet at a bar or restaurant or something, talking about farming or tractors or something. So
it's a hazard of the occupation, right? You can.
That's right.
It's
That's
not
right.
that you can. Well, yeah, you could smell a farmer in some parts of the world, but you can identify a lot of times.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It doesn't matter how old or young you are. And I feel like it only gets, I'm not old by any means. I'm 30 years old, but I feel like as I get older, you can definitely start to accompany our type of personalities and our type of personas when you see people out in public. Oh, yeah, that guy probably farms, or this guy does it. You know what I mean? So.
And every once in a while, you got to throw them for a curveball. That happens
that's right.
too.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
We have one of our regular market analysts. We just did a live episode with him over in Lincoln, Nebraska, and him and his mom were talking about they had a wedding coming up, and he says, "I ain't wearing nothing but this, Mom. I'm wearing my jeans, my boots, and if they're lucky, I'll wear a sport coat, but no tie, no tuxedo."
Yep. Yeah, that's why it's always comical when when our group we go to DC with our farmer organization in the spring for hill visits, and all of us get, in suits and ties, and it's definitely most of the time out of our norm, but it's kind of fun to get to, play the part a little bit when we're down there in Washington, DC, and lobbying on behalf of farmers. So that's the fun part of the job.
And that's when you kind of go, oh, this collar is tight. Who bought this
Yeah,
thing? Yeah, this is kind of itchy. Yeah.
yeah. Especially when I first started, I hadn't tied a tie since high school. Before games and stuff, you tired. So it'd been quite a few years. You had to get back in routine to learn how to tie a tie.
Well, we'll talk sports just for one more moment. Iowa hired a new men's basketball coach, and he's known for wearing ties. And so that when his introductory press conference, they had a couple of people outside. They were giving away gold ties, and somebody was demonstrating to the students how to do it, and so that they could go into the press conference. So see, they could start at any age, whether it's a kid with a clip-on or an adult with a clip-on. It's still okay to know how to tie it.
Well, there's my next leading question to you is: are you a Hawkeye or are you a Cyclone?
I'm sorry, we lost connection. You're telling me I have to pick one of these two great institutions of the state. They both have good qualities. To my right, I have the Iowa football poster, and I have the Iowa State football poster. I've gone to games in both stadiums. They both have good natures. I did not go to either of those schools. I went to a small Division III school. That if we want to talk wrestling, we're on. So think Mount Union
Oh
and
yeah.
Wartburg are very similar. Wittenberg is where our coach
Yep.
came from. So I'm familiar with, Ohio does D3, Wisconsin does D3 football well. So uh, I
Well,
guess I don't have to pick either.
yeah. Well, Mr. Matt Campbell from Iowa State, he's from my alma mater here in Canton, Ohio, and his brother was my athletic director in high school. So I got some ties to your Iowa State football coach a little bit. So
Well, you can't always shake it. See, just like farming, you can always talk sports with people usually if you start digging
oh,
enough.
that's right.
So
That's right.
so you mentioned Canton. You farm. Did you grow up in that same area where you farm there south of Canton?
Yeah. Yep. So the farm where I'm currently sitting at here, I bought back in 2018 off an older couple that was friends of my grandparents. So this is actually in the town south of where I grew up, about 6 miles from the home farm, as we call it. So grew up the actual town was Richville, but it was a Massillon, Ohio address. So Massillon, another town, very well known for their football and heritage in that realm of things. But yeah, we're the home farm itself is just south of Route 30, kind of getting gobbled up pretty good. Development pressure and industrial stuff pretty decent there. Around 30 and 77, the interstate kind of is taking up a lot of that. But where I'm at here, we bought some farms down this way here in the recent past. So we've kind of opened our persona this way a little bit. So it's a little more rural down here. Different townships, some different zoning things that kind of help protect us here in this area. So kind of just got to keep up with the times in that sort of way.
And then to widen it out even further, you're really between Cleveland and Columbus. Is that
Yeah,
even wider? Yeah.
yeah. So Columbus would be about 2 hours southwest of me, and Cleveland is like a straight hour north. Actually, my wife works in a Cleveland office. It's actually Independence, but it's deemed as Cleveland. She drives there 3 days a week. So it's about 60 minutes, 65 minutes, a little over an hour to get there in a day's time.
So if you've driven I-80 enough, how would you compare what your land is to what you see in Indiana, Illinois, and Iowa?
Well, we have a little definitely the land masses are smaller field wise. I mean, our average field size is probably about 30 acres where we're at. We have some upper in the 80s, 90 acres, and some as small as 2 and 3 acres where we're at. Just kind of the persona. We're kind of on the northern edge of Appalachia, believe it or not. Tuscarawas County, which is just south of where we are here by a few miles, is technically still Appalachia, part of Ohio. But if I want to compare it to the beautiful landscapes across Indiana, Illinois, and Iowa, uh, we're rolly. We're not steep, but we're rolly enough. Nothing tabletop flat. We still obviously got a tile and stuff too, but we do have some. This farm I'm actually on here, we actually have some terrace. We terrace this or strip it, I call it. So we have some 90 to 120 foot strips around the hillside across the street. So we have a good variance of that, and plenty of waterway issues and erosion, all that fun stuff too, and goes into our farming practices and so on and so forth.
Well, I'm a Northeast Iowa guy, and behind me right here, there's some crooked things. Those are the terraces too, and the waterways that we have. So yeah, there's some commonality there. Corn country mostly.
Yeah, I tell you what, we're in a good spot for corn, especially. We have several feed mills here. There's a lot of livestock, a lot of chickens, decent bit of dairy left, and some hogs. But And then we feed beef cattle, so that's our main driver of our corn acres. But there's a lot of good local demand for corn. We have an ethanol plant about 50 miles to the south that's taking a good chunk of corn, and it's a lot of the acres are pretty well evenly rotated, but there is quite a good demand here locally for corn. I have a local corn basis of anywhere from 35 to 50 over at the current moment, so we'll see how that continues on for the summer. So.
You mentioned the semis, so is that your primary mode to get corn to where it needs to go?
Yeah, yeah. So one of our spin-off companies we have is we have a small trucking company. We have 6 trucks, all hopper bottom. We haul ag commodities, soybean meal, distillers grain, soy hulls, fertilizer, grain, feed-based ingredients, all that kind of stuff. So we got guys on the road every day hauling, like I said, several feed mills around here. We haul into, then we haul grain out for a couple of local co-ops and stuff as well. So keeps us hopping that way too. But yeah, semis and trucks, straight trucks are pretty well everybody around here has gotten away from wagons for the most part. I know when I mentioned my friend from Northwest Iowa, when I got to talking to him about, gravity, farming practices and whatever, and he was sending me pictures of guys with, 8,000 series deers pulling 2 gravity wagons behind him, pulling into the mill. I just kind of shook my head like, that's still a thing. So it kind of made me laugh. But
Oh yeah, we'll show. I got pictures. I can see them clear as day. And you've got some of the older farmers, and you got younger farmers that need it for whatever the purpose is. Because we still have plenty of farmsteads that have smaller bins. That's what they put in there because a semi is a waste of the energy. That thing's
yep.
running off to somewhere else. We deal with river traffic, barge traffic. You're close enough to the lakes, but I don't know how much that impacts you on where your grain could go.
Yeah, so a lot of the grain here, for example, like the local soybean side, there's a company my sister is a grain buyer for. They export a lot of beans on shipping containers. So they go to Cleveland, get on a train, and then they head over to Port of Baltimore, and then they go out that direction. Quite a few on rail too. There's a lot of rail beans and corn that make their way south into the Virginia, North Carolina, even like over east into Delaware. There's that livestock market as well. Uh, there is some ship side up towards Toledo, up on Lake Erie, that side of things. There is some export market up that direction. Or if there's actually a river terminal. The way the crow flies directly east of me is the kind of the far north tip of the Ohio River. So our local co-op does have a river load port there that they offload and then offload fertilizer and reload grain there at that port as well. So yeah, well, we're kind of in a good spot for a lot of different diversity as far as that goes.
Well, that's what I was picking up, and that's probably why your basis is as good as it is because you do have options, and that kind of keeps everybody honest and competitive.
Yeah, yeah, and kind of where we're at, we're more of a deficit area for acres and grain because, like I said, you go south of us not too far, and it grows from corn and soybeans to hills and trees and cows very fast. Then obviously west of us not too far really gets into big grain country, but yeah, there's a lot of usage here in this eastern side of the state, eastern corn belt, but we there is a lot of grain rolls in here from other parts. So
You mentioned the ECB. Let's talk Eastern Corn Belt weather outlook because that is what's on so many minds. Because, the weather people that we talk to, who they just say, sure looks wet back over there. What's it been like in the last 8 to 12 months for you weather-wise?
yeah, I tell you what, our weather patterns like the last 4 to 5 years has just been continual. Our we actually this year finally actually had a winter with some snow again. The past 4 or 5 years it's just been an extremely wet winter, mild temperatures, lots of rain. But we finally got a more of a good old fashioned winter, as my dad and grandpa would like to call it. We actually had some snow, and the snow stayed on the ground for more than 2 or 3 days at a time, and we got some frozen weather and stuff. So uh, we were really dry last summer. It was the driest summer we've had since 2012, which was a detrimental drought year to most of the corn belt in the U.S. But we were the second. We were as dry, almost as dry as 2012. That continued the whole way through the fall. Uh, Surprisingly, things didn't turn out as bad. Soybeans were kind of a soft story, but corn turned out fairly well, I think, with all the moisture we had early. But then over the winter, it just kind of continued on to a kind of a dry winter. I mean, February and March was a little on the damp side, but then the second half of March there, man, it was nice. We were spreading fertilizer, hauling manure, doing some groundwork done to fix some tile. I mean, you name it, we were getting stuff done. And then here in the last 7 days, we've had a little over 5 inches of rain from the whatever you want to call that trifecta of storms we had come across. I mean, I know we're not as bad as some of the folks there in Southern Ohio and Kentucky, and those poor guys. I've seen some really heart wrenching videos and stuff of the flooding and stuff down there, and the tornadoes and all that as well. But uh, no, the Eastern Corn Belt is going to be wet, and it seems like it's going to continue to stay wet. That's been our persona like the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, I remember as a kid, there was times where we'd use the same tractor to plant corn and soybean. We would just unhook the corn planter, bean planter up, and we were always done in a very fashionable time. And now there's out of the last 5 years, I think our average start date's been like the second week of May, just because that's the way our wet weather patterns just continue to trend wetter and later. I think I've planted more into June the last 5 years than I ever had, my first, many years of farming. Remember growing up as a kid, so.
Well, what does that do for yield? Because, we hear, oh, it's got to be an earlier to be able to maximize yield. I mean, it doesn't sound normal to be planting that late. Have you been able to at least get, I guess, 5 years? If that's what the pattern is, that means the trend is that way. But 10 years, are you at least somewhere in that trend of a 10-year yield?
Oh, absolutely. I tell you what, I know we as farmers talk about things and we complain about things and this and that and the other, but one thing we cannot shake a stick at is just where these genetics have come. It don't matter what brand you have on your hat. These seed genetics have just come so far, even in the last, 10, 15 years. I mean, we look at our weather patterns from 2012, and I remember cutting a lot of 20 bushel soybeans, a lot of 130 bushel corn, even worse than that. And we were well above and beyond that for the year for a similar climate for the growing season. So I think in regards to that, our patterns just seem to be, at least here in the Eastern Corn Belt, we've just been kind of shifted a little bit. Where spring carries on a little longer, a little cooler, a little wetter, longer into May, but yet it stays warmer into September and October. And if we get those rains late September, we can still, dry down and raise a good crop. And we have been for the most part. Our trend line yields have continued to rise. Our APH have continued to rise like normal, how most people have expected to. So it just kind of gets you, it tests your stress level a lot whenever, I talk to my friends from Illinois, Central Illinois and Northwest Iowa, and they're side dressing corn, and we haven't even planted corn yet. So.
Well, and there's been the Northwest Iowa. I'm sure your friend probably told you the way June turned out last year is when there were these 9 to 12 inch amounts, and that really kind of messed up his district. Northwest Iowa really kind of, if that doesn't happen, I think Iowa really is a leader in corn production. Otherwise, they were just like everybody else last year because of that heavy rain.
Yep. Yep. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And there's no 2 years alike. We can all agree to that.
Yeah.
Especially don't ask any guy, 50 years of age or above. Will tell you that, 88, people want to compare 88 to 12 or 88 to 2024, what we had, but there's never going to be an 88 again in those guys' eyes, so, but yeah, so who knows? I mean, I'm pretty optimistic. Even with all that rain, the waters have started to recede. The rivers are still high, but as far as stuff puddling and stuff, it's gone back down a little bit. But from where we were at beforehand, I think we'll be all right. Here it is, what the 8th or 9th of April, and the 2 week forecast looks about like a normal April forecast. So things can change for better or for worse. But I guess we've had enough years here recently now where it's like, well, as long as we have everything ready, and like most people are too, we're well equipped to knock out the acres in a timely fashion. If God willing, weather need be, we can do it all in a pretty timely fashion. So
That big equipment can roll and get a lot done. Okay, so you mentioned corn. What other things do you plant there in your farm?
yeah. So we're a little corn heavy. We're like a 60% of our acres are corn. 40%. Well, okay, we'll say 50% corn, 40% beans, and like 10%. We plant a little bit of wheat, but mainly wheat for rotation, and then we feed a lot of cattle, so we bed with wheat straw. So we do raise a little bit of wheat for wheat straw, and then we spread manure in the summertime and tile and all that fun stuff, fix waterways and ditch and all that fun stuff. So, but yeah,
Is that percentage pretty much the same every year?
yeah, for the most part, it stays relatively the same. Yeah.
And is there anything that makes you question, take your hat off, scratch your head, and go, well, maybe what if we add 5% more acres for this crop?
Yeah, well, and wheat's the big one. Wheat's kind of one of those crops, especially around here, where it's like, well, you almost have to raise a certain amount of wheat to even, in my opinion, feel even like I call it messing with wheat. If you're gonna go out and just plant 20, 30 acres of wheat, it's like I don't want to get the combine out and do all this work in the dryer and everything for that little bit of wheat. But you raise 150, 200 acres of wheat, it makes it a little more justifiable, in my opinion, to go out and get everything out and grew through the whole shebang. And like I said, we're in a decent market for straw as well, and wheat too. I mean, a lot of Ohio's grown wheat here is used domestically in some flour mills. So all of ours goes to a local flour mill here in north central Ohio that gets turned into goldfish. So eat your goldfish. I appreciate it.
The
So
crackers, I
I
assume, the goldfish crackers. Yeah.
yes sir, yes sir, yes sir. So, but
Yeah.
no, the corn's the big one. If it was up to me, especially with the way our kind of seasonal trends have been for weather, corn is just so much more favorable in being able to maintain increased yield versus soybeans. But it's also one of those things where I don't know, we don't have the some of our dirt is very would be very good to raise continuous corn on it, others not so much. So we kind of pick and choose farms. We have like 4 farms that we'll do a corn soybean rotation on, 2 years of corn, 1 year of soybeans on, and then some other farms that we incorporate wheat into for a 3-year rotation, and others are just corn beans. So
And do you ever keep like 1 to 2% back where you don't commit and kind of how the wind blows you that day?
oh, absolutely, yeah, especially when the weather patterns kind of trend a little wetter, and obviously everybody's got the differentiating of farms, but we have some wetter farms that are kind of always a toss up because if you can get in there in a timely fashion, if they're planning for corn, they'll stay corn, but it's also if it does get a little later side, it's not too bad to put some beans in there too. So
So and is that what, oh, that's what the market says it's up 30 cents today. I'm going that way. I mean, have you ever made a decision that way?
I, a tidbit. The thing with us is for most guys in this area, storage is a big one, right? So, with the way our yields have kind of drastically increased, I'd say, from 10 years ago to today is a very drastic increase. We just kind of see it gradually increase several percent every year, just again for farming practices and seed genetics and just even weather in general, I would say. But with the corn demand we have and uh, it's just kind of more favorable towards corn. I'll be completely honest. And farmers, I think, not a single farmer is going to tell you that they'd rather, in my opinion, plant soybeans and corn. Corn's more fun, more bushels to deal with. Everybody likes hauling. Like everything about it. Now, obviously, economics wise, in 2022 we planted more soybeans because it was more economical to do so. So, but this year, in my opinion, at least on our farm, it's definitely more economical to plant corn. So we're going to be few more acres corn heavy. So
Yeah, and we have one of our regular market analysts who always says, "When in doubt, farmers always going to plant corn over beans." Just
Yep.
it's just you love to do it, as he says.
yep. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
it
we
sounds like it
with the
holds
amount
true.
of cattle we feed, we always have to accompany a certain amount of acres, regardless that we use to feed our livestock. So anything after that, we kind of we like to play the market game a little bit and see where we're at with that. So
Well, let's talk about the livestock because the last couple of years, the last year for sure, it's on that uptrend. Have you been trying to expand, or how hard is it to hold and not sell? What's kind of been the thinking?
yeah, so I graduated college in 2015, and when I was in high school and decided to go to Ohio State and study agronomy, my dad was like, "You want to come home and farm?" And I said, "Yep, that's my plan." He's like, "Well, we got to do something a little different." Then he said, "To support two." We were kind of like right on the verge of acre wise enough to support 2 families. And obviously at that age I didn't have a quote unquote family yet, but in the near future it was inevitably going to come. So we diversified a little bit and added on to 2 of our existing small barns and made them so we were up to about 250 head capacity. And then when I graduated college, we built another 250 head barn. So we're feeding currently right now between 500 and 600 head on a couple different farms, and very fortunate. The Lord has blessed us with ample opportunities in that direction. We have got hooked up with the 2 suppliers that all of our beef is used here domestically in the state of Ohio. We ship about 10 head every week to one facility, and then there's another facility where we take 1 load of 10 a month. So don't have to look for semis. Don't have to play the guessing game with the big packers, and especially in our side of the state, it's very expensive to get fat cattle anywhere in a timely fashion. So it's kind of worked out really well in that fashion of things. But I tell you, it's a fun time to have fat cattle in the barn.
I suppose, but are those 10 picked because of they've hit the certain profit point, or just that's the way it's kind of has to be to keep the operation what you have penciled out?
Yeah, so the gentleman, one of the company that we sell beef to, Ohio Premium Beef, they just they buy off of all local farmers, guys that range anywhere from size to feeding 50 head to 1,000 head, and they just have their number of guys that they buy a certain amount from every week for their orders, and we're we've kind of settled on they just religiously almost get 10 head a week. So we kind of have our barns and pens set up in size wise to where we can draw a load out of this pen today, and next week we can here move cattle around or whatever, and we buy cattle in sizable groups to where it's we kind of plan for that as far as you know 40 head or so a month is going to leave our barns, and then we replace obviously in a fashion similar as that. So but on the other end of things, replacing these feeder calves has also become quite the interesting deal here as of recent. We local report had 5 weights hit $4 a pound here in our local market. So
Well, that's what I was going to ask is where do you normally get your feeders from?
yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, just south of us here, like my in-laws live about an hour south there in Harrison County, Ohio, and it is all oil and gas, hills, pasture, and cows, no corn. So we've got hooked up with quite a few local families down there that feed your raise mama cows or brood cows, and we've got hooked up with buying cattle from one guy, and then he says, "Hey, my neighbor John's got a group of 20. Would you be interested?" Yeah, sure. And go look at that guy's cattle, and then just kind of word of mouth, we've gotten groups of cattle in certain areas, and then got a good relationship with a gentleman in more South Central Ohio that he's just a big cattle backgrounder, buys a lot of cattle out of Kentucky, West Virginia, and Southern Ohio, and he backgrounds him about 600 pounds, and then we've established a really good relationship. We'll go down there with get a load of 50 and bring it home and start on feed and do our protocols and everything. And it's worked out really well. It's been a really good established relationship. That was a Facebook made relationship, believe it or not. Everybody, we like to joke about social media and stuff, but I found this guy on Facebook in a Ohio feeder cattle group, just posted on there looking for some feeder cattle. And 4 years later, we're buying almost half our fat cattle herd comes from this guy's farm. So
Well, Facebook's for all type of things. It's not just
that's right.
necessarily for prom dresses or hubcaps. It can also be for
Yeah,
live cattle or for
that's
cattle.
right. That's right. That's right.
All right. As we sit here in early to mid April, you talked about we talk about livestock. We talk about the corn outlook. We both skirted around the soybean talk. What has you the most optimistic in 2025?
Like the big thing I was reminded, especially watching the markets go up and down drastically here in the last 6 7 days after the president's tariff announcements. You almost have to be optimistic that the president knows what he's doing, and this administration is going to get something done on a positive aspect. I believe that. So yeah, I believe as much as we talk about and we work towards and finding new uses and new markets for our grain, because the average person just wants to say, well, we can you don't have to raise corn and soybeans. You can raise other food, make food cheaper here and there, and we both know as well as I do that that's just not how farming and economics work, right? But there's ample opportunity I feel out there in the world marketplace for our grains. People want American made products. It don't matter if it's corn or soybeans or electronics or whatever it is. So I'm pretty optimistic about the future of, I guess I want to say, global trade for our products, because we believe and we know that we raise an ample product, whether it's grains, beef, pork, whatever it is, and I think the world wants that. And especially as economics around the world get better, they're going to be wanting to get our products elsewhere. So I'm optimistic about the future for our global trade here in the United States.
Well, and global for you really is. I mean, Canada is. I mean, always been a big partner with the United States, as is Mexico. It just kind of depends on your geography. So as long as you can keep that relationship going, I would imagine your optimism would stay high.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
All right, then let's. Is there anything that has a little pessimism in the year?
Uh, I guess just I want to say patience, and I can aside to that as well. I mean, patience in the markets, patience in the weather. It's one of the many things I pray for on a daily basis is for more patience. Sometimes as farmers, we want to get too ahead of the game and get too anxious about, whatever problems get thrown at us on a daily basis. But I think just trying to be patient with everything going on, and especially once the planters get rolling, we get a good weather stretch and we can get things in the ground, and just hoping for I want to say a more normal weather year. But we both know that there is no normal anymore in weather. So I guess we'll guess we'll see what the year throws at us for that. I hope I wish we could shift some of this rain back to the west for my friends in Iowa and Nebraska and so on, and Kansas and so on, that maybe need the rain a lot more than we do as of now. So I guess that's maybe where my pessimistic outcome in. They're a little unsure about the weather.
Or even have maybe a June 1 delivery, a July 1 delivery, an August 1 delivery. That would be helpful too.
Yeah. If we get like 2 inches of rain, the beginning of June, right after we're done, and maybe the second week of July after we're done cutting wheat, baling straw, I'd be all right. But and then a couple so on and so forth from there, I'd be all right with that. So
Yeah, that'd work. And as we wrap up, again, mid-April timeframe here, how soon before you think you can roll and actually put something into the ground?
if the weather holds true as what my weather app on my phone tells us for the next 14 days, I'm hoping we can get in the fields here maybe the end of next week and start doing some burn down and get the rest of the fertilizer spread and so on. And obviously for our livestock side of things, that kind of comes first. We got, spring manure cleanup to do and stuff, but planters are almost ready. So, we don't necessarily get in a planter and go. It's like we'll start planting some, then we'll veer off and go back and do some more of this and get back into a planter. It's kind of all over the place. So, but tentatively the last week of April, a little tidbit I joke about my dad and grandpa, but dad and grandpa always said you can't do anything till after Easter. So
Yeah. No
and
matter
with
when it
Easter,
is, and it's a floating holiday, it's exactly
that's
right.
right.
That's why
Yep.
you don't plant potatoes until Good Friday. It's all of that stuff.
That's right. With Easter being later this year, it's shaping up to hold true to those old timers things, I guess. So
Sounds good. All right, Ben, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And we'll talk to you in the middle of the season and see how things are shaping up.
hey, sounds good. Looking forward to it. Take care.
Thanks to Ben, we'll catch up with him in the middle of the growing season to see how spring turned out, as well how things are shaping up in the summer. New episodes come out each and every Tuesday. Next week, we will go to Idaho, find out what's happening out there and how things are vastly different from depending on your elevation. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.